I've got with me a colleague from the European Asphalt Pavement Association, Dr. Brexio Gomez. Hi, Brexio.
Hello, Malcolm. Hello, nice to see you again.
Yeah, we've been moving in similar circles in recent weeks in Brussels and Dublin and various other places. So some of the audience might remember Brexio from a couple of years ago where we were talking about resilience. And for those that don't recognise him, as I said, he's technical director at IAPA, and even comes with experience of the UK networks with his postdoctoral research work at the University of Nottingham. So again, welcome, Brexio.
Well, thank you, Malcolm. I would like to thank you and the rest of the organization for bringing me this opportunity of being here again virtually. Sorry about that. I'm looking forward to one day also enjoy this event in person. But in the meanwhile, I hope that we can have some nice exchange that the audience will appreciate as well.
Yeah, great. Always good to have a conversation with you. Right. So our topic for the day is all about innovation, and particularly innovation for driving towards decarbonisation. And in other sessions this morning, we've been shown or will see some innovations that are being trialed and introduced, and even some still in development, both in the UK and from other parts of Europe in particular. When we're looking at innovation, sometimes we have to go right back to basics and think about what are the drivers for innovation. And something that crossed my mind is actually, decarbonisation is a global challenge, but we're starting to see elements of regulation and legislation that's enforcing that. I assume we're seeing the same sorts of drivers in the rest of Europe.
Well, yes, actually, when it comes to decarbonization or to sustainability, I would say in general, I think what we are seeing now is a tsunami of policy, legislation, regulations, standardization, etc., that we haven't seen before. Everything is changing and changing really fast. And yeah, you talk about drivers. I think, especially for our case, that we are a specific subsector inside the construction sector that is characterized, among other things, by the fact that most of our funding is public. So I understand that decision makers or managers for this funding, the administrations have to justify very well how these funds are managed and how the money is invested. And so what we have been seeing is that traditionally, the criterion of cost was so important in the decision making, how to make things the cheapest way possible, what is the cheapest solution, who is going to make it the cheapest way. And now I think that with all this change in legislation, that the whole paradigm of how to build, construct and maintain roads is changing. And this is why I really believe that legislation, regulation is definitely one of the biggest drivers we have in our sector to change the way that we do things. Right?
Yeah, and we've spoken about this before, and it comes across all sorts of levels. So you talked about sustainability. One of the angles or mantras we're saying a lot is that sustainability comes from durability. So if we as a sector can enhance and extend the lifetime of our products, then there's less need for maintenance interventions, and that public funding goes a lot further. But are there other regulatory influences around?
So I think, to me, the best example that comes to my mind and really reflects very well the scenario that we are seeing now in Europe is the innovation, or although I don't consider it anymore an innovation, is the case of warm mix asphalt. Something that was created like more than 20 years ago. That's why I'm saying it's not really so innovative. But somehow the idea or this concept was like put in a drawer for all this time. In Europe, we basically haven't used it that much. And now, because different changes in policy are happening in different countries, suddenly it became a crucial tool that we can have. And this is why a lot of things are changing. So for example, in Germany, the industry already has an objective of producing 100% or let's say having 100% of the production of asphalt mixtures in 2025 done at low temperature, warm mix asphalt. And this is happening because in Germany, we have a new regulation related to exposure to fumes on site. And we have seen that reducing temperature is by far the best way of meeting this requirement. In the Netherlands, for example, we have a similar case. The industry has the plan for next year to have 100% warm mix asphalt, and is mainly driven by regulations on stack emissions, on certain compounds and the stack emissions and so. And again, the best way to meet the requirements or these levels are by reducing temperature. In Norway, for example, we have green public procurement, where every proposal in tendering and so needs to have an environmental product declaration, and needs to show what is the amount of emissions that are required for the proposal that every manufacturer or any contractor is proposing. The one with the minimum is established as the baseline, and for the others, they add a certain amount of money to the budget, depending on how many extra kilos of CO2 are in the proposal compared to the minimum one, meaning that there is a conversion from emissions to money. And this means that there might be some manufacturers that they think that they are very competitive and that they produce very cheap. But after this, if they don't use green innovations or green technologies, what is happening is that they are not really as competitive as they think. And this is creating an organic competition where actually tools such as warm mix asphalt is being one of the main solutions that they can find to have a better EPD and get more contracts. And we are seeing that already in the last years, around 30%, 25-30% of the production in Norway is already warm mix asphalt. So for one reason or the other, we are seeing that different changes in policy are pushing the sector in the same way as like reducing temperature, reducing emissions, fuel consumption, energy. So, yeah. And we are seeing more warm mix asphalt. And I think this is a very paradigmatic example.
Yeah, certainly talking to my members and others, I always look at it as environmental challenges that become technical solutions. Mm-hmm. So you're answering one thing in a technology sense, and then through the materials themselves. And in fact, you mentioned those sorts of volumes. I think this year we're up to roughly 30% of warm mix production in the UK as well. So we're heading in that right direction. We've been a bit slow, but we're still promoting and pushing those sorts of technologies. One thing you mentioned in there in terms of public procurement and the evidence base for the levels of decarbonisation, you talked about EPDs, and I like to flag that up because we've just published 4 verified EPDs in the UK for sort of 4 very common materials. Now, in that process, it was clear to me that we're all going to have to go that way. And again, this is tied to regulation. So we've got the revised CPR landings soon. How's that, do you think, going to be carried across in Europe? Is it going to be a nasty surprise, or is it something that's already been considered, that whole approach of analysing where our emissions are?
Yeah, so okay, you just mentioned the CPR, the construction process regulation, which is right now under revision by the European Commission. It's been a long marathon. It's been years that we have been following all the developments in this regard, a lot of consultations, a lot of different drafts that they have made available. And there are huge changes compared to the current scenario. So this is the next big tsunami that, as I mentioned before, that is coming. It's a very long regulation that brings a lot of new things, but one of the main innovations or the novelties is that manufacturers will, to place a product in the market, in the European market, or at least for CE marking, it will not be enough just to have a declaration of performance based on how we understand it nowadays, which is basically mechanical performance indicators or essential characteristics related to performance. From now on, manufacturers will also have to declare, at least mandatory is going to be, they will be obliged to declare the environmental performance as well. So there is a series of environmental indicators that the manufacturer will have to provide, to declare in the shape of an environmental product declaration. And this is why over the last years we have been working also in the product category rules, in a series of complementary standards and trying to complete the framework to arrive in time for when this happens. But yeah, this is a huge game changer, and it will, I think it will create similar conditions that I just described that happened in Norway. The moment that manufacturers will have to declare, calculate according to certain rules, horizontal rules for everybody the same, they have to calculate their emissions and declare them, then it will create an ecosystem somehow where it will be the customer who will actually be able to choose the solution that not only is not only in terms of economic, like what is the cheapest, but also in terms of performance and now also in terms of environmental indicators. So again, this might be a big driver for this kind of sustainable innovations.
Yeah. So with appreciation of that approach, that framework that we're going to have, I mean, how is that driving the thinking in Europe? And I know it's a leading question because you've got the slides. I've seen you share slides in the meetings before. So I mean, how is that reflecting? How is that being translated into, let's say, policy for the sector?
So one of the main things is the decarbonization. Is when we talk about environmental indicators, there are many different types of environmental impacts that will have to be declared. But at least because it's the first one that will need to be declared in time, the timeline that they are foreseen for the implementation of the new CPR, this is going to be the carbon emissions. And this is why, in fact, we even have some limits, some objectives of decarbonization that we have in Europe, also in other parts of the world. This famous reduction of 55, actually, as you mentioned, I have the slides. Let me just show. So people will find it easier to find.
Yeah, it's easier to.
Yeah.
Yep, I've got those.
Yes, thank you. So as I mentioned, we have these objectives, European, in Europe, at least I would say, that is reducing 55% of greenhouse gas emissions, 55% by 2030 compared to 1990. This is the reference year, and then become net zero or carbon neutral by 2050. So as I said, because it's the first that comes is the emissions, and so in EAPA we wanted to be a bit proactive and try to discuss and see, okay, how are we going to move forward in order to meet these objectives? What can we do? So these objectives are for everybody, it's for countries, it's for society. So how is the asphalt paving sector, what we need to do, what we need to change from now to these dates to make sure that we meet these objectives? And this was an exercise that we did over the last couple of years. It was a 5 steps exercise, starting for calculating what were the emissions in the reference year, 1990, then seeing what are the emissions now, in 2024, what will be the emissions we will need to have in 2030 and 2050 to meet the objectives. Then we had a look at the decarbonization potential of different technologies, and we had a wide range of different technologies that we took into account, from how we reduce emissions if we increase the percentage of or the content of reclaimed asphalt in the mix, or for example, if we reduce the temperature, if we do more warm mix asphalt, or if we replace fuels in the asphalt plant, or if we, et cetera, et cetera. We did a lot of things. And by seeing where we were, where we need to be, and the decarbonization potential of different technologies, we established a roadmap or the level of implementation of different technologies. What is the combination of levels of implementation for different technologies that we will need to have in 2030 and in 2050 to make sure that we meet these objectives. So we calculated the emissions by following the EPD model, let's say, so through all the modules or the stages of the service life, not including what is not commonly known as modules B, which refer to the use stage, but we did include the supply of raw materials, the transport to the asphalt plant, the impacts in what we have in the asphalt plant, the transport of the mix to the job site, the impacts happening in the job site during the installation, and then at the end of life, the impacts associated either with the deconstruction, the transport of the site one asphalt to an asphalt plant or whatever is going to be processed, and then the processing of this material either to be reused or recycled, or even for a certain fraction that may be disposed in a landfill. So we had included all these impacts along the service life of an asphalt mix. And what we have seen is that the current situation is that to manufacture 1 ton of asphalt mix, it is necessary to produce around 65 kilos of CO2 per ton, as I said, CO2, yeah. And something very interesting when we see around this figure in the left is that not all the modules, not all the stages of the service life contribute the same. In fact, just the first 3 modules before the material, the asphalt mix, leaves the asphalt plant already contribute to more than 80% to the total emissions. And this is why having technologies to impact in these stages will be more effective, I would say, or more beneficial.
And that's where we have control as producers to try and reduce those stages. They're completely within our direct control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. So, right. So this is the current situation. I think in the UK you have similar numbers. So this is what we got.
Yeah, there's always a health check because it depends on what data sets you use when you're building these numbers. But certainly, where all the major emissions are rising are the same.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is an interesting point. In fact, we published in EAPA a document that is basically the summary or the conclusions of the results. We are about to publish now all the explanations with the background data that we use, how the data collection, everything, because, yeah, as you said, this is something that may change depending on that. But, well, as I said before, then seeing the impact of different technologies, and so we saw the situation in 1990 is the first column, then the situation nowadays, which, as you can see, is already a reduction of around 36%. And then we consider different technologies that are feasible to have by 2030, which is already in like 6 years. So here we didn't include, let's say, innovation that's there's still a bit of science fiction, or we are still in very early stages of development. But for those that are feasible to have by 2030, we establish what are the levels of implementation and that we need to have. And we found a solution, a combination, let's say, that it makes feasible to have a reduction of at least this 55% by 2030. And then repeating the same exercise by 2050 and adding, so increasing the levels of implementation for these technologies and adding others that we include for the first one. For example, the use of electric vehicles or things like that. We didn't include this for the first, for 2030, but we are expecting that by 2050 this will be something more mature and more mainstream, that we will be using the same how to replace fuel, to have, I don't know, like things like hydrogen in asphalt plants or things like that. This is something that we have included already by 2030. We will have it in some plants. We already know that there are some plants in Europe using hydrogen, but it's something that we consider for 2050 because it won't be the main case in 2030. So anyway, we found a solution, let's say. Something important is that we target actually 90% reduction. We left this 10% at the end that we are expecting to be covered by other things that have not been included in our study. For example, the decarbonization of energy production or things like that, right? So things that will happen anyway, or we are expecting it to happen, and that also will contribute to decarbonize our own industry as well. This is a different way of seeing the roadmap. Is in a graphical way how what are the levels of implementation of these different technologies we're expecting in 2030, 2040, 2050. I don't think it's necessary to get through all the details here. I encourage everybody to download our document on the APA website and see all the details. But something that is important is that this document also includes some chapters on other benefits on some of the technologies that we are including here that are not reflected in a DPD, but still have some benefits. For example, the use of warm mix asphalt have other benefits that is not just decarbonizing the manufacturing of asphalt. It has other, for example, as I mentioned before, lower fumes exposure for the workers, or handling lower temperature materials and these kind of things. Or, for example, the fact that by using low rolling resistance asphalt mixes in pavement surfaces, we can actually reduce the fuel consumption and consequent emissions of the vehicles rolling on the pavement. So it's actually a huge benefit that we can do with asphalt, but it's not going to be reflected in the EPD of asphalt. So there are different considerations that we also have here, and we finish a bit with some notes for the implementation. So what we consider for the implementation, this thing that we always mention, this collaborative responsibility, right?
Yeah, that's good. It's I helped draft this document, but it's about flagging up as we're not alone in achieving our share of decarbonisation. So we will be relying on our supply chain to help decarbonise fuels in asphalt plants and as you said, road resistance and so forth. But it's it's for all of us. Our clients need to specify those materials once we're there and ready with them. But I think the thing that stands out to me with this is that we haven't oversold it. We've gone with visible technologies, stuff that's current and reliable. If you've never seen them, then yes, they are innovation. But there will be more innovation on top of what this roadmap already indicates. So I think it's a really good document, and as you say, would recommend anybody on the call today getting hold of it.
Basically, we are here. This last section is a bit like a call for everybody to join this movement. Of course, it's the first call is for ourselves, for the industry, to make sure that our companies do their homework and they adapt as they need to do to meet the objectives. But it's also for policymakers, for the administrations to also do what they need to do. Sometimes this requires changes in procurement or standardization or specifications. And then, for example, I mentioned before these other things happening that will help us. So here we are also saying we need to decarbonize the transport, we need to decarbonize the energy production, we need to decarbonize the raw materials. We are calling for our suppliers of raw materials to also do their homework to provide materials that have lower impact, and et cetera, et cetera. So again, it's this collaborative responsibility.
That's brilliant. Thanks for our time has sped by already. So unfortunately, I think that's where we have to call it a day. So thanks very much again for your efforts and for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again in the near future.
So thank you, Malcolm, and as I said before, to the rest of the organization for giving me some time to present. I would say I always joke a bit that this is our bestseller at the moment because it's a document that everybody likes very much. I think we did a good job in IAPA doing this, and so thank you for some time to show it to the audience today.